McKissick from CUES, welcome back to see you on the show. We're delighted to have you return with additional thoughts on leadership.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, so it has been an interesting year, 2025. The economy is slowing down. There's new rules being made and unmade, and if there is ever a time of uncertainty, this is a very significant one. So tell me a bit about your thoughts on uncertainty and leadership in difficult times like these.
Well, thanks for asking. I think, the answer to that question is changing daily for us, all of us, no matter who we are and where we're leading or how we're leading in the system, across credit unions. As you well know, and I know most of your listeners know, we are so fortunate to have so many leaders who put people first. And this whole mantra of people helping people and being both operationally excellent and mission or purpose focused is something that is really natural to many leaders in the credit union system. And I think that's the good news for us because right now that tension, I think, between operations and mission is showing up across many different industries in the United States and elsewhere. And for credit unions and for credit union leadership, at least that is a natural coupling. The idea of balanced leadership between what it means to hold and grow the bottom line and also to serve and lean in to our purpose is not foreign to us. So yeah. I think that's the good news. The challenge, of course, is that we are surrounded by, as you say, this crazy prolonged uncertainty and a whole lot of volatility that is really shifting the sands underneath us. And so even the most grounded of leaders are still finding themselves challenged on a day-to-day basis, just managing the polarities of the times.
Yeah, the volatility in the economy, I think, has caused a lot of people to just say stop, to just slow economic decision making. To you will see that in the GDP number. I think you're going to see that in loan volume if you haven't already. And you mentioned in the sort of pre-work that we did to today's conversation about the acronym VUCA and its antidote. So I know you've written on that. If you would sort of unpack that whole concept for us.
Absolutely. I mean, I did not invent VUCA. I know that the term VUCA has been used in a wide array of leadership circles for a long time, including but not limited to military leadership, right? But the acronym VUCA, I've also seen it represent different things, but the way I'm interpreting it today is about volatility, which we've talked about, volatility, uncertainty, chaos, and ambiguity. So volatility, uncertainty, chaos, ambiguity. These are far more familiar words, I think, for a lot of us recently, especially those of us in leadership roles, and not just individually, but the combination of those things happening all at once and at speed is a real challenge for leaders, again, no matter how grounded or seasoned, that they may be. So we recently put together a piece about leadership in polarized times, which is really just intended to represent that kind of state of VUCA. Because for us at CUES, we are about leadership development, talent development, and it's a huge part of our mission to make sure that leaders of credit unions at whatever level, at the level of the board, at the level of the executive team, or elsewhere within the organization, also system leaders, right, have the tools that they need to put their strategies into action. And it's what we call put wheels on it.
Mhm.
And so strategically in this VUCA environment, it's one thing to have strategies to manage that environment in place as an organization or as a leader in your leadership practice. It's another thing to sort of know what to do, when to do it, and which tools to use under which circumstances. And so this leadership in polarized times piece, I'm not sure I can say it's the antidote to VUCA, but there's certainly tools that can be used to help us as we find ourselves in these situations.
Yeah, well,
So,
you're feeling pressured in your economics, right? With potentially decreased loan volume and interest rate spread, and then maybe you're questioning the plan. So in times with extreme volatility and unknown, what are the tools? Get your toolbox out and share
yeah,
it with
no,
us,
you're
Heather.
right. There are so many operational challenges, and there are so many mission-focused challenges as well.
Hmm.
With the reduction in federal aid of a variety of different
Yeah.
sources, and being able to lean into our communities the way that many credit unions have been accustomed to leaning in on them. But in this particular case, I'll talk about the tools sort of for internal leadership, if that makes sense. So if you're the leader of a credit union or a credit union serving organization, and you're facing this volatility and uncertainty and chaos and ambiguity, there are really four things that we like to focus on when it comes to doing our job as strategic leaders and making sure that the workforce is humming along, and that to the degree possible, these external forces are not creating unnecessary disruptions, because there's enough disruption, right, coming from the outside. So sometimes we find that our workforce is also polarized.
Mm.
These times are really putting a magnifying glass on differences of opinions.
Oh, yes.
And so, how do we as leaders make sure that internally within our organizations, we're helping to manage that and keep the discourse civil and productive? So, really, four things. First one is about just monitoring the emotional climate. And sometimes people want to interpret that as a soft skill. But the truth is that we all know managing difficult conversations at work is one of the biggest jobs that
Mm.
there is. And making sure that either we as leaders or the leaders that report to us have mechanisms that genuinely check in with the workforce about how people are feeling, not just about day-to-day operations or their usual workload, but how, if these external forces are affecting them negatively, and to what degree that is affecting them at work. Because there's a lot of data right now that is suggesting that it is a huge disruptor. Stress levels on the job are on the rise, which obviously affects productivity, it affects retention, and it affects effective leadership. So, monitoring the emotional climate, looking for those cues, but not making too many assumptions. People want to be asked direct questions, which means as leaders, we need to not be afraid of having those difficult conversations, or being able to at least be comfortable convening and facilitating a discussion where there may be no clear conclusion when
Mm.
differing opinions clash. The definition of a crucial conversation that Vital Smarts promotes is a crucial conversation is what happens when opinions differ, emotions are present, and stakes are high. So I feel like those three things kind of describe every conversation that's
Yeah, like
happening right now.
everything recently, right? So,
Right. So monitoring that climate is the first thing, and being able to appropriately engage in the necessary discussions as a result. So strategic human resource management, I'm pretty sure that is the
sure. Yeah,
SHRM. So SHRM, Strategic Human Resource Management, they have a thing called the Civility Index, which is interesting. And that index tells us, and I'm going to look at my notes here real quick, that US organizations collectively use more than US organizations collectively lose more than $1.2 billion in reduced productivity per day due to workplace incivility.
mm.
So the whole idea is that stress on workplace dynamics that can lead to unproductive behavior and also can lead to increased absenteeism, decreased collaboration, etc., etc. These things are really the drivers of why monitoring that climate makes sense. Yes, it's about taking care of people. And yes, it's about doing the right thing because we care about our employees. And it's also operationally important that we monitor that climate for all of these other reasons
Well,
as well.
you said cues, which is something you say a lot, but you said that there are cues to watch for. Can you cite any of what those cues are?
In terms of monitoring the emotional climate,
Yes.
yeah, these kind of indicators that I'm talking right now are great indicators. So, is there increased absenteeism? Right? Is there decreased productivity, especially in job sets that are high stress, often frontline
Hmm.
positions or telephone contact center positions, right? Those are two indicators to monitor, not just individually, but collectively as well. There's also decreased attendance in what would normally have been considered a team building or culture focused event.
Hmm.
Sometimes when we see fallout at those things, it means that the emotional climate between the people that were usually excited and happy to get together under those circumstances has declined. Not always, but often. Not seeing the same kind of attendance at the types of things that we've done in the past to galvanize the team can be an indicator that the team may not be where they were. And of course, workplace conflict,
Yeah.
the HR process, the escalation of day to day differences, the increase in grievances or filed complaints against coworkers or leaders are also always just good indicators of what that emotional climate might look like.
Yeah. Some just subtle differences between leaning in and perhaps neutral or even leaning out.
100%. And a lot of credit unions do engagement surveys, employee satisfaction surveys. They can watch that data, but a lot of times those happen annually.
Hmm.
And so monitoring the emotional climate might also look like a quick pulse survey or some other way to gauge the environment using an existing tool, because that also helps you compare the data of where you have been to where you are right now.
Yeah, unless you're just starting and then you don't have the data to compare to yet. I mean, is that, but you got to start sometime and have some baseline data.
That's
So
right.
first tool is to look for the cues and to track the sentiment data, right? That is the first tool of leadership in polarized times?
I think that is an important one when you are leading within a credit union or an institution of some kind.
All
You
right.
know,
Well, let's hear about the second tool.
well, one of the things that I like to remind people of is that uh, existing policies or procedures or practices can sometimes be forgotten or left to the wayside when we're in these kind of VUCA conditions. In other words, it's easy to want to say, hey, we need a new rule, or we need a new policy, or we need a new practice in response to what is happening. And sometimes that's absolutely true. And other times, that's a symptom of the fact that we haven't just stepped back to re examine what our existing policies are. So, in the case of things like workplace incivility, right? Or in the case of increased absenteeism or mental health challenges, sometimes it's important to remind employees and reinforce what's already there. So many credit unions have stress management resources or counseling programs or wellness programs. Reinventing something new may or may not be appropriate, pointing them in the direction of what has always been there or is a resource that they are familiar with or have heard about but never utilized can also not only offer a solution in that moment, but it reminds them that the organization has that foundation already underneath it. This has already been there. Same is true for policy discussions and for the kind of the idea of escalation practices or grievance practices. Sometimes those policies and practices are already in place through our organizational development teams, our learning and development teams, through human resources. And instead of creating a whole new process, picking up the phone as a leader and asking for help and asking for advice. How can I navigate this difficult conversation with this group? What's the right way for me to proactively inquire with my people? There are often solutions already in place that can help the leader and can also save time and, frankly, just be more efficient if we don't think we have to reinvent those wheels just because of the circumstances of the moment.
Very good. So don't overreact and recreate
There you
when
go.
you may already have the system.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well, so you identified the cues, you measured them and paid attention to them,
Mm-hmm.
and then you used perhaps your existing systems. So the first two steps. What's the third?
I'm gonna I'm gonna say that the third you could argue is the first, which is
Mhm.
to make sure that we're leading by example. uh, you know, Looking in the mirror on a regular basis, metaphorically,
Mhm.
is such an important leadership practice. It's a huge part of emotional intelligence. It's a huge part of leading with empathy and heart. People talk a lot about authentic leadership. And unless we're really undergoing sort of self examination on a routine basis, sometimes there's an authenticity gap. So it may be that we as leaders need to self identify certain practices or responses or knee jerk reactions that we have to certain things, and that we are modeling the behavior that we expect to see in the others within our organization. And most of us, especially in a senior leadership role, are excellent at that. And when you are talking about all of these compounding variables, when stress levels can be so high and people are running so fast, and that magnifying glass has the sun shining through it, we can all fall victim to not showing up as our best selves. And that's okay, but making sure we're re-examining our own habits, practices, and reactions, I think is a really important step for a leader if we are working to create a harmonious work environment. I also think that it's really important, to the degree that we feel comfortable and can, given our environment, that we talk about that. It's one thing for me to look in the mirror. It's one thing for me to recognize something that I may be doing that is counterproductive or that I need to improve upon and stop there and do that work on my own silently. It's another thing to be vulnerable and to talk about what I've noticed and how I am working on it and what I want to change, and ask for support and accountability from the people within my organization.
Hmm.
That is not just self-examination, that's leadership. And so leading by example, I think, is a really important tool in that toolkit.
I would like to name that as my favorite one so far.
Hey, okay, well, we could just stop there.
No, but we can't because there's one more and it could be even better.
Well, I think all of this really kind of culminates into what's the end result? What's the outcome, right? The outcome that we're going for in pretty much every situation is um, maintaining an excellent culture in our workplace or improving that culture in our workplace. And under these circumstances, what I'm really talking about is just encouraging respectful dialogue. And that can't always happen under our watch, right? So we have to make sure that the organizational practices also support and reinforce this. Making sure that there are safe places for employees to disclose. And that might just include your staff meetings, and the way that you conduct them on a routine basis. In addition to that, this whole idea of trusting others and talking about trust, because trust leads to empowerment as opposed to withholding trust leading to fear. And
Hmm.
when you're in an environment that is fear-based and trust is withheld, you only compound that fear. So really,
Hey, can you unpack the meeting? I'm wondering if you could, can you do an example of the meetings? Like you said about the making sure your meetings were safe spaces for the right sort of conversation. Can you give an example of what that might look like?
yeah, I think that's a good way to talk about, maybe in some combination, some of the things we've talked about already. So if you're monitoring the emotional climate, you're reinforcing existing policies, and you're leading by example, okay, then it can be your weekly staff huddle, or it can be your monthly meeting of all staff everywhere. But what does that meeting look like and feel like for those participants in order for them to feel like they could really bring their authentic opinions, and that it would be safe for them to express them? So if I, as a leader, race into the meeting 5 minutes late and dive immediately into the agenda and chastise people for not having hit their targets or objectives, and don't ask questions about what's happening with them or do anything to seek to understand how they are either feeling or doing in the current environment. All of this might mean I'm not looking in the mirror
Hmm.
or leading by the example, because if I had a leader that was conducting a staff meeting, I might prefer that leader to be respectful and on time, to have a pre-planned agenda that includes, even if it's very brief, a check-in with the people in the room about how they are doing. Is there anything that's adversely influencing their work? And that even if it can't be fully unpacked or understood in that moment, that you will create space, or that there is an existing policy or mechanism that will allow them to unpack that further at the appropriate time. That we're leaning in with trust by acknowledging accomplishments and constructively addressing a miss, right? And fostering an environment of trust between the colleagues themselves and between those colleagues and you as the leader. So it might sound, Doug, like meeting management 101. And when we're all running so fast, under such difficult circumstances, no matter what's driving those circumstances, this is a true statement across the times, right? It's easy to lose sight of how those little things make such a big difference.
The little details that they go to the core of the way you're thinking, the way you're leading, the core values that are behind those little decisions that add up to big consequences.
That's right. So, you know, you might argue that all times are polarized, and that these times that we are living in are not the only polarized times that have been or ever will be. So, if we think about these as kind of evergreen leadership skills, where really our objective is to promote respectful dialogue, to maintain and improve our workplace culture, to keep operations humming smoothly and efficiently, you know, then all of these things apply across the board, right? This whole idea of monitoring the climate, making sure that we're leveraging our existing policies or practices, making sure that we are leading by example, and really creating that safe environment for trust and respect. Those are the things that I know there are really excellent leaders across the credit union movement.
They really are.
That
Yep.
they are doing these things every day. And I'm really grateful to witness it.
Well, the document that Heather was lightly referencing is on the CUES website. We'll attempt to post it in the links for the podcast. It's called Leadership in Polarized Times: Four Practices for Success. And the author is clearly an expert in this area. So, Heather, thank you so much for writing that article, for kind of unpacking it for our listeners. And then I know you have, the great CUES Directors Conference coming up in December, and the best weather conference in the credit union industry, the January meeting in Hawaii. Any comments you want to make on what's coming?
Oh, well, we are as excited as ever to offer all of our programs for members and new members who are coming in. I would really encourage people to look at cues.org for the calendar of events coming up. Even through as early as this summer, we have a wonderful array of smaller workshops and seminars, many of which are targeted for our boards of directors. And those events are really popular and a nice way to share stories and learn together with a smaller, more intimate group. In addition to some of the larger conferences coming, like our Governance Leadership Institute, like the Directors Conference, or like the Q Symposium that you're talking about, which will be on Maui. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to tell people, please come and see us, give us a call, send me an email. I'm the only Heather there. And would be really happy to help match people with the right leadership development opportunity for themselves or for their teams.
Heather, thank you for your leadership in the credit union movement and for your comments today. We'll look forward to our next episode and to a CUES meeting soon.
That sounds great. Thank you, Doug.